Positive Heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have John Assaraf here with me on the show. John is a world-renowned mindset growth expert who has written 2 New York Times bestsellers and appeared in 12 movies. Ones you know, such as The Secret and Quest for Success, along with Richard Branson and the Dalai Lama. Hey, John, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Brandon, great to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. Been looking forward to this for some time, and I'm gonna kick this off with my cliche opening question, which is this: You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Helping people shatter their limitations so they achieve their life's biggest goals and dreams.
Now we have 9 more floors to talk about that. So why don't we? I love that, and I'm excited to dive in and hear all about how you achieve that aim. But if you would start us off with giving us some context on who you are, your backstory, whatever feels relevant to share how you got here.
So I'm going to have to go back probably about 50 years, and my family had moved. That's all? My family had moved when I was about 6 years old from Israel, where I was born, to Montreal, and the reason they moved is they didn't want to be raising kids, my brother and sister and I, in a war-torn area all the time. Yeah. Now that was the good news. The challenging news is that 5, 6 years old, I only spoke Hebrew, and I was put into grade 1. And it was all in English and French. And I quickly became bored. I quickly, fell behind the other kids, quickly got into, a lot of trouble because I was a pretty rambunctious young lad. And over the next couple of years, I fell behind and just didn't do well in school. And that was the beginning of me feeling like I wasn't smart, as all the other kids, not all the other kids, but a lot of the kids that were immigrants didn't speak the language, and they were in the same situation. And so I started to have the beginning of feeling I wasn't, really smart. And my parents couldn't help because they didn't speak the language, and my brother and sisters couldn't help because they didn't speak the language. They were learning it as well. And so that was kind of like the beginning of feeling like I wasn't smart enough. And for the next, 10 years, 11 years in school, I was consistently, I was in the top 1% of my class that made the other 99% possible. I was like at the bottom all the time with D's and F's and D's and F's and D's and F's. Grade 7, failed English, failed math, left high school, grade 11, said, this isn't for me. But right before I left high school, I was involved with a little street gang that sold drugs, did breaking and entries, and got into a lot of trouble with the law. And that was kind of like my little posse that I hung around with to fit in, to make a little bit of money. And that was my life, between 12 and 17, 18. And then I had this, I guess, phenomenal experience where my brother, who was a tennis coach, was living in Toronto. I was living in Montreal, which is about 350 miles apart. And my brother said, hey, Johnny, why don't you come to Toronto for the weekend? I want you to meet this guy. And this guy is a very successful real estate entrepreneur. He has real estate offices. He develops real estate. Toronto is booming right now. Why don't you come at least talk to him? Maybe he can help you out. So I took the train from Montreal to Toronto. My brother picked me up at the train station, and we go for lunch with this man. His name was Alan Brown. And at lunch, this guy asks me, what are my goals? And I said, well, I'd like to move out of my parents' house. I'd love to buy my own car. And I'd love to make more than $1.65 an hour, which is what I was getting paid working in the shipping department of Philips Electronics, packaging, boxes to ship out, taking stuff out of boxes, putting them on the shelves, every single day, which I hated. Yeah. And so he said, that's great, but what are some of your bigger goals? I said, I've never really thought about it. So he went into his briefcase and he took out this document and he said, would you mind just answering these few questions and then let's talk? And so I said, sure, Mr. Brown. So I take this document, and the first question, Brandon, says, at what age do you want to retire? And I'm like, I'm 19. And I look at him, I go, excuse me, sir, what should I write down here? My father is a cab driver. He's not retired. My mother works as a seamstress. She's not retired. We don't know anybody that's retired. Like, I didn't even know the concept of retirement. He says, just put a number. And so I said, is like 45 okay, 26 years from now? He says, yeah, 45 is a good number. Put it down. I said, okay. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking this is ludicrous. The second question says, upon retirement, how much net worth do you want to have? And again, I'm like scratching my head. And I asked him, excuse me, sir, what does net worth mean? He explains to me net worth, right? And so he explains to me net worth. I said, well, what am I supposed to put down there? I said, well, is $3 million enough? And he goes, $3 million is great. Put it down. The next question, where do you want to travel? What kind of car do you want? What kind of home do you want? Who do you want to help? It basically was a questionnaire about the lifestyle of my dreams. So I just filled it all out. And he picks up the document when I'm done. He reads all this information. He says, now, this is a life worth creating and living for. He said, I'm going to ask you one question. And the answer to this one question will determine whether you achieve every one of these things.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, one question?
That's all it takes? I just got to get
that's
one
all it
question
takes.
right?
I'm like, one question? And so he leans in, he goes, are you interested in achieving these things? Or are you committed to achieving them? I'm like,
big question.
Is this a trick question? Like,
in my
mind, is this a trick question? And so again, feeling a little stupid, I say to him, what's the difference? And here's what he said. I'll never forget this. He said, if you're interested, you'll do what's easy and convenient. You'll allow your current stories and reasons and your excuses about school, about falling behind, about getting into trouble to define who you are. And you'll keep repeating those habits every single day of your life until you die. He says, but when you're committed, he says, you'll upgrade your identity to match the destiny you want. You'll upgrade your beliefs, your habits, your knowledge, and your skills so that becomes who you are, and your behaviors then match the goals you want to achieve. And it made sense. And so, he leans in again. He says, so now that you know the answer and the difference, are you interested or are you committed? And I don't know why, but I kind of got excited. And I said, well, in that case, sir, I'm committed. And he reaches out his hand. He says, in that case, I will be your mentor. I said, wow, thank you. What's a mentor? That's how green I was. Right. And he explained to me.
Little did he know you're casing his house to see what kind of goods he
So he asked me to move from Montreal to Toronto. And then I gave him a whole story of why I couldn't. I had $50 in the bank. I didn't have a car. I didn't have an apartment. He says, great, there you go, making excuses already. He says, first lesson I'm going to teach you. First, you set the vision and the goal, and then you figure out how to achieve it.
Yeah. So
are you interested? Are you committed? Are you going to move to Toronto? I said, fine, I'm moving to Toronto. He says, great. The next thing I want you to do, this was March of 1980, to put into perspective.
Wow.
And he says, there's a real estate class that starts on May the 2nd. It's 5 weeks, 9 to 5 every day. Pass the test, and then I can give you a job. I said, you want me to go back to school? Real estate? Isn't there like legal things and finance things that I need to know? He says, yeah. I said, I'm not a very good student. And he goes, here you go again. See how fast you default to your reasons and excuses. He says, and it's $500 to sign up for the class. I said, well, I don't have $500. I'm going to make the story a little bit shorter. Finally, I made the commitment to go back to school for 5 weeks. I borrowed money from my mother, borrowed money from my brother, borrowed money from my sister. My father didn't have any. He was a gambler, and so he didn't have any money. And I moved to Toronto 2 weeks later, got into real estate school. June 20th, 1980, I graduated and passed the test on my own. First time in my young adult life that I actually feel proud of myself, doing something on my own accord and stepping up to what was possible. That was the beginning of my life changing. And then he taught me how to sell real estate on commission only, and then taught me how to become a real estate agent. And that was the beginning, of my transformation. Wow. And every day he had me look at the goals that I had. He had me write down, what would I need to believe in order to achieve these goals. And I came up with, oh, I need to believe I'm smart enough. I need to believe I'm good enough. I need to believe I'm worthy. I need to believe it's possible. I need to believe I can learn. I wrote down all these beliefs. And then I took what I had written as my goals, which he told me to do, and my new beliefs and the habits that I would need to create. And I recorded them onto a cassette tape. And every day on my way to work, on my way home, I would listen to this cassette tape and see myself, visualize, which is what he taught me how to do, myself achieving, becoming the next best version of myself. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of my passion for personal development, because I was the guinea pig.
Yeah, right. And of course, as soon as you start seeing the results, and you had some real contrast there to work with, it sounds like.
First year, I made $5,000 more than my father did.
Wow. Wow.
I made $30,000. My dad made $5,000.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. What a trip. What a trip.
Yeah.
Well, and it seems like you just never stopped from there. Many multi-million-dollar companies created later. And of course, all the things that I mentioned at the top of the show. So, you know, I'm going to go ahead and assume that your techniques have evolved over the years, and even recently with creating an app to help others. And so I'd love to, you know, maybe since we don't have a ton of time together today, I'd love to just get like, what is some of the distilled wisdom that you over, your journey that you figured out to help others to tap into their superpowers?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, and I always I get into I challenged myself to study behavioral neuroscience and psychology to understand, like, what am I dealing with this thing called my brain, right? This is my plastic brain, but every human being, is born with this amazing gift. The human brain is worth what, $1 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion, if you could replace it or replicate it. And like so that. One of the things that I've discovered over the years is functionally every brain works the same. Just like functionally every gas car works the same, every electrical car functionally works the same, every human brain works the same. And most of us have never learned anything about our brain. So let me give you an example. When we talk about, what do you believe to be true? Were you born with those beliefs? The good ones, the challenging ones, the limiting ones, the expansive ones? The answer is no.
Yep.
Were you born with any fear? No. Were you born with a self-image or a self-worth built into you as a baby? No. Were you born with character traits? Yes. Were you born with certain genetic propensities? Yes. But we weren't born with any beliefs, any self-image, or any fears. And so where did I or you or anybody watching or listening develop the belief that I'm not good enough or worthy enough or smart enough or deserving enough? Like, where did we come up with that belief, that idea? And then where is that in the brain?
Yeah.
So the discovery of, I think, the century is really around the science of neuroplasticity. So when we're born with, about 100 billion brain cells. I think of it like 100 billion marbles, right? And these marbles formulate connections, right? Neural pathways, they're called. They connect no differently than a highway system connects to the road systems, from one city to the next. And so our brain develops these patterns or beliefs based on anything that we were told or experienced as a child when we didn't have the deductive reasoning ability to say, is this true or not? We just believe. We were in when we're born, we are born, and we're in the imprinting years, the first 2-3 years, then the modeling years, then the experiential years. And then we just refine and reinforce patterns that were given to us before we're 12 years old. So if you were born, let's say in my case, where I didn't do well in school, that meant I wasn't smart. Then I reinforced that for, 15 more years because the evidence showed that I wasn't smart in school. Right. Now, we didn't take into consideration the fact that I was, didn't know the language. So I fell behind, but that's logical. A child mostly isn't logical. Right? That part of our brain hasn't come really online until we're in our mid-20s. So we develop these beliefs, we develop this self-image, we develop this self-worth, we develop what to be afraid of, what not to be afraid of, whether it's fear of being embarrassed, ashamed, ridiculed, judged, fear of failing, fear of disappointment, fear of anything. And that triggers these different circuits in our brain. And so the reason I'm going there right away is most people have never understood how powerful they are. And they keep repeating these patterns because of how the brain is wired for number one, safety and security, number two, avoidance of pain or discomfort. But number three is to conserve energy. And the way it conserves energy is it develops these habits. And then the habits just run automatically, thought habits, emotional habits, behavioral habits, which produce results. So what Mr. Brown did for me at the ripe young age of 19 is he had me deliberately create a new image in my mind of what was possible. He had me deliberately recite, remember, repeat, emotionalize these new beliefs as if they were real, even though they weren't real, because he understood the power of the subconscious mind. And so I was reciting beliefs. I believe that I'm worthy and smart enough to achieve my goal of $10,000 a month. I wasn't even making $1,000 a month when I said that. And at first, there's another voice in my head that says, that's bullshit. You're not making 10 grand a month. So I had like this, me deliberately saying something, and then something in my head was going, that's bullshit, right? And he taught me that is, like the Frankenstein's monster part of our brain that wants to keep us attached and behaving in ways that match our belief patterns, our expectation patterns, our set points. And he said, through spaced repetition, through visualization, through emotionalizations, you're actually activating and rewiring your own brain and your own beliefs and your own self-image. And so the fact that he was able to explain to me why I was doing it and then what to do when my other part of my brain said, that's bullshit, you're not making 10 grand a month. He gave me counter strategies, to be able to understand what was causing this negative, disempowering self-talk or this voice in my head to pop up. And just to go next, hey, I don't need your old opinion anymore. And over the next, year, 2 years, 3 years, I went from making $30,000 a year as a real estate agent at 19, 151,000 at 20, 250,000 at 21, and then I went and traveled around the world to see the world with some of the money that I made.
Wow.
And then when I came back, I created my new vision, my new goals, and started doing the same thing again. And at 26, I started Remax of Indiana. And over the next 10 years, I opened up 85 offices, had 1,200 salespeople working for me, and we were doing $4.5 billion a year in sales. And then I taught it to them.
Wow. That's quite the journey. I mean, the contrast is really incredible when you think about, I mean, you're talking in the span of 10 years to go from, robbing homes or whatever you were stealing, at the kid, to that sort of expansion. And anyone, of course, who's had any sort of entrepreneurial ventures or even success knows what it takes to accomplish something like that. So it really takes some discipline and
here's something to like really consider, right? So we say, the human brain is powerful, right? And the question is, okay, but does the brain receive information from our outside world? Well, of course it does, through light, through sound, through tactile senses, through intuition. We're receiving information. Does the brain send out, signals as well? And we know that it does. So it receives and it emits as well, right? And so here's the question, that's really worth considering. If it's true that everything is energy, and scientifically we know everything is energy, even though my body appears to be solid, it's vibrating packets of hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, right? Sentient being called a human. But think about this for just a moment, a radio. you're sitting anywhere in the world that maybe can connect to a signal. And let's say you want to hear rock and roll music. You find out what station is that playing on, and you tune the radio so it receives that signal.
Right.
Even though you can't see the signals, they're here. What about punk rock? What about classical music? What about jazz? Oh, come on. I love jazz. I don't like the other stuff. Well, you're using the radio, your mobile phone, to tune in to a frequency that's already here. Now, here's something for everybody to think about. Is it possible? Just is it possible? When I set a vision and I set goals for what I want to achieve, and every day I prime this thing called my brain to tune in to that signal. And through repetition, I teach my brain that this is what's important to me. This is what I want to trade my life for. This is what I want you to help me achieve. And is it possible that when I focus on that every day and I tune into the station of what I want, I'm tuning into that frequency, right? I'm tuning into teaching my eyes, right, which just allow light to come through it. My eyes don't see, it's your brain that sees. But when I give my brain the instruction of this is what I choose to focus on, and I repeat that, I actually am training it to create a subconscious pattern to lock in on that station. That's called the law of resonance. And if you follow and read anything that Tesla said, back in the day, he said that if you want to understand, the universe, understand energy, understand frequency, understand vibration. And so I didn't know it back then when I was 19 and 20 and 21. But over 40 years of studying this thing, I now know that I am co-creating, my success. Everything that I see is what patterns I have dominate in my brain. And so we don't see what there is to see out there. Our brain finds what we believe.
Yeah. Right.
So here's the question. What do you need to believe to build the business of your dreams, to build the life of your dreams, to have the physique, the energy, the relationship, the career, whatever it is of your dreams? Well, first see it in here and believe it in here, and you'll see it out there.
Right.
So I became very, very good at what some people call manifesting, but I was deliberately using the tools that everyone's been blessed with.
Right. Yeah. I love what comes to mind with what you just said. I made a t-shirt years ago that says "Be it to see it," and
there you go.
It's also what comes to mind is first kind of being exposed to this sort of idea many years ago, reading Conversations with God, where in those books he talks about most people are doing something like work in order to have something like money, in order to be something like happy, be kind of approach. Yeah. And actually needs to be flipped. Be something like happy, and you find yourself doing and having the things that are a reflection of that, right?
It's an inside out game, and we haven't been taught that. We haven't been taught the real and a humble way power that we have. And if you think about, 150, 200,000 years of human evolution, billions of years, of the universe evolving. There's laws of physics. We know how those work. We're just unraveling and uncovering the laws of quantum physics, the unseen world. But we've discovered a lot. And most people are just inefficient and ignorant, not knowing on how do I optimize my brain? How do I optimize who I am, because they think that they're their body, but they're not their body. They're not their brain, their heart, their liver, their lungs, right? And so the combination of the brain and these 9 systems in our body, we are so powerful. And the same brain that Elon Musk's or Brandon or Oprah or whoever you see that you admire are using, you have the same capabilities with certain different propensities. But we are way more powerful than we have been taught to believe.
Well, I love thinking of it in terms how you put it at the beginning, like, okay, what would this cost to, we can't even build something like this at this point. So let's just for round number, let's put it's $1 billion in your head, right? And anyone can have a Ferrari in the garage, but the guy who has trained at how to drive race cars is going to get a lot more mileage out of that vehicle than the
exactly
one.
Yeah. And on that line, I often ask my students, let's say we're playing this game of life. And in this game of life, we have the health game, the wealth game, the relationship game, the career game, the business game, whatever game is going on in your life. What level of the game do you want to play at? Kindergarten, where you're just playing around at it? High school, grade school, university, pro level? Everybody says pro level. And when they say pro level, I said, do you understand what pros do that most people do not? They practice. Yeah. They practice before game time, but they're not just practicing anything, right? It's perfect practice makes perfect, not practice makes perfect. Most people have been practicing the wrong thing for most of their lives, and they wonder why the result that they're getting isn't what they want. Yeah. And so how do we align, our beliefs, our self-image, our self-worth with the behaviors required to achieve, the success we want? And I often, on my desk, I have, these Rubik's Cubes. I like Rubik's Cubes. Mm-hmm. And, is the 2x2 solvable? Of course it is. You just need to learn the algorithm, right? Well, what about the 3x3? It's a little bit more complex, but it's solvable, even though most people have never solved it, even though they've tried. Well, what if you want to get aggressive and build the 4x4? Yeah. It's a little bit more complex, but you need to know the foundational algorithm. What about 5x5? A little bit more complex. But what about the big one? What about the octagon multi-fast? Is it solvable? Yeah. So when somebody says to me, I want to build $1 billion company, I said, great, you're going to need to solve this. Mm-hmm. You want to build, a $100,000 company or make $100,000? Great, you just need to solve that. Yeah. So you get to choose the complexity. And here's the beautiful question. In today's day and age, is all of the how-to readily available for just about any goal we have?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's nobody here that, is building, ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. From scratch as an idea. And so most of the goals that we have for health, wealth, relations, career, business, money, all the how-to already exists. I can Google it, ChatGPT it. So the biggest challenge that most people have is not that they lack the knowledge and skill, because that's readily available like that. Yeah. It's first to make the commitment to the vision that they want, the goals that they want, and then to reverse engineer what does my self-image and self-worth and identity need to be? And then how do I develop that? What do my beliefs need to be? And how do I implant those into my head? Then what do my habits need to be? Which habits do I need to release or let go of? Which ones do I need to create? And then what's the easiest, fastest, best way to do that? Most people can't answer those questions. But that's what I've been researching, studying, and teaching to, hundreds of thousands of my students over the years, because I've reversed engineered the methodologies to do it faster and easier.
Yeah, and I know you recently have launched an app to help support people doing this as well, correct?
I did. So. I wrote an Amazon #1 best-selling book called Inner Size. And in Inner Size, I'm teaching people the difference between setting goals and achieving goals from a brain perspective. It's easy to set goals, but if the mechanisms in the brain aren't optimized and working in concert, then we have chaos and we have, dissonance is what it's really called. But then I developed an app based on, what are the best inner sizes, right? If you think of exercise to strengthen your muscles, think of inner size to strengthen your neuromuscles. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we can use affirmations in a variety of ways. We can use visualizations and first person, third person visualizations. We can use emotionalizations, mental contrasting. There's probably 10 techniques that athletes, astronauts, Navy SEALs use to really rewire their brain for unstoppable success. And so I've had so many students that I've taught this to many, many years ago, and they wouldn't do it. So I created an app with 500 different inner sizes that are 10 to 20 minutes long. to help people train their own brains for health, wealth, relationships, career, entrepreneurial success, business success, sales. And then we've got, incredible following right now. Tens of thousands of people are inner-sizing daily. My goal is to have millions. And we just launched the app like 90 days ago, and it's got 4.9 stars. And
amazing.
I couldn't pay for the comments that we've gotten if I wanted to. They're so good on the app or in the app store.
So. Congrats. Yeah, I actually downloaded and have played with it some and tried the one inner size exercise so far, and very, very cool accomplishment. I love how just giving people the tools, and of course we'll put a link here in the show notes as well if you guys are interested in getting in it and all that stuff. So I think that's a really important piece, because it's one thing to talk about all these things and it's like, okay, I'm excited, John got me pumped up, now what do I do? Okay, the podcast is over, what direction do I go? Sure. And I think that's a huge piece, is integrating and building those new neural pathways, as you've suggested, and having tools handy to do that. And it's taking advantage of, you think about it, how long have apps even been around? It's things now we think about being sort of like, we get used to things quick. It'll be like 10 years from now, it's like, can you believe when they didn't have AI?
That's right.
That's coming, right?
Absolutely. So. It's here. It's just insane, what we can do with AI. And, what's really interesting is, the very nature of habits is for adults, let's say, 25 and older specifically, 97% of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are based on habitual thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. So we reinforce and repeat the patterns that we acquired in the first 25 years of our lives. And so even when something new comes out, or we read a book, oh my God, this idea is amazing in the book, the very nature of how our brain works is very few people actually apply what they learn, because that's not what we're taught. We're taught to read. We're not taught to apply what we learn. And so even with AI, there's such a small percentage of the population that's using it right now. It's not because they don't want to. Their habits are not wired to.
Right.
Right. And so even though the tool is like another $1 billion assistant, right?
Yeah, right.
It's got it. Anyway, you understand the power of it. Most people aren't using it, or they're using it like a little bit. And so the very nature of change is something that I think is worth talking about. Here's what we've discovered, in the research. Let's say I have a habit of brushing my teeth with my right hand. Mm-hmm. And I've done that since I was a little kid and could brush my teeth. And let's say I want to develop a new habit of brushing my teeth with my left hand. Here's what the science says. To create a pattern that's strong enough to make it habitual will take between 66 days and 365 days. Now, that might sound like a lot, but let me put perspective onto this. Let's say, whatever city you are in right now, and you leave your house and you travel through the, side roads of your home to the main road, to the highway, right? Imagine if all of a sudden, they tried to recreate a different path to the highway, right? It would take a little bit of time, right? To landscape it, to get it ready, to lay down the new roads.
Right.
Well, if you think of new roads and then you think of neuroad, it takes a little bit of time for us to create a new road, a new path. That's why it's called a neural pathway that gets strong enough to replace an old one. Mm-hmm. So here's what I tell all my students. Any change that you want, that you're committed to, give me 100 days as the minimum requirement to create the change that will last. Mm-hmm. And once you create this new pathway and your brain goes from conscious effort to subconscious operations, which requires almost no energy, the habit now builds you. because you're compelled to do it. And if you think about, people go, they want to lose weight, it's January 1st, and they want to make more money, they want to leave a job, and the intention is there, but the process isn't
right
to maintain it. That's why people lose weight and gain most of it back and then some. It's called the yo-yo effect or yo-yo syndrome. So any change that you want to make, first question is, am I committed to this change? Yes or no, binary answer. And then if I'm committed to this change, then I must be prepared for at least 100 days of a little bit of action towards that every day. Why? Well, because when we're starting to build a new habit, a new way of thinking, a new way of feeling, a new behavioral pattern, we have to remember that it takes that 66 to 365 days. But here's what happens. If I do a little bit every day, I'm reinforcing that pattern every day. And at first, the habit is more important than the complexity or intensity. So if I want to, let's say, brush my teeth with my left hand, right? Just grab the toothbrush, do a little bit every day. Just keep moving it from right hand to left hand, right hand to left hand, right hand to left hand. Put a reminder for you on your mirror so that you can create the new habit and then just mark it off 1 day, 2, 3, 4, and go to 100 and watch what happens. All of a sudden, somewhere around, 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, now you're aware, okay, of the difficulty in doing this. And now you can override your propensity to actually take it back in your right hand. Right. And I did this, by the way, 3 years ago, and I haven't switched back to my right hand. It took me about 6 months before it felt comfortable. Right. Now, if I pick it up with my right hand, my left hand grabs it and says, no, you're not brushing your teeth with your right hand. Wow. So that's how you can really start to train your own brain. Yeah. And that's what I call as inner size.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. So curious to get a little more, out there, if you will, as we talked about energy and everything being energy and the brain being a receiver versus a transmitter. And I'm curious what your thoughts are as we start to sort of do this work on ourselves and take out the garbage of thoughts that are sort of holding us back and all these things. What are your feelings on sort of starting to receive more information from beyond the veil, let's say?
Sure. Yeah. So let's talk about several things. So number one, let's talk about meditation, right? And there's a whole bunch of different types of meditation. And one type of meditation is you obviously sit quietly and you clear all your thoughts. That's one type of meditation. Another type of meditation is you're aware of your thoughts. Another type of meditation is when you're in a quiet, relaxed state and you're in either an alpha brainwave frequency or delta or theta or even gamma. They've recorded in the brains of some monks, which is the fastest brain wave in the universe. Cosmic waves is a gamma. And so ask yourself this question: why do we use telescopes and microscopes? Well, we use telescopes to see further out into space and microscopes, right, to look deeper into, the nucleus of an atom, an electron microscope. So we can see different layers, okay, of life itself. Well, what about our brain, right? We know that we have 5 brain wave frequencies: beta, alpha, delta, theta, gamma, right? And so is it possible that in a meditative state, I can access, different layers of consciousness or information? What about through some psychedelics, right? That open the gateways to different layers of consciousness. So we can use, whether it's medicines, psychedelics, whether it's ketamine, ayahuasca, which has exploded over the last number of years, assisted MDMA. These different medicines allow, the networks in the brain that usually work one at a time, the salience, executive functioning, or default mode network. Usually when one is on, the other two are off. Yeah. But there are methodologies like meditation, which is a really great place to start, that starts to allow you to experience and see yourself from a different perspective, right? And so I'm all for exploration of consciousness, exploration of reality. And quantum physicists will tell you that they believe that there's 11 dimensions, not our 3D version. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do I access dimension 4 or 5 or 6 or 7? Mm-hmm. And so we can say, great, well, we can learn the art of meditation, of quietening down so that we can see more, feel more, experience more, connect with, this field of intelligence that we are in. It's not like there's an out there and an in here. Right. It's kind of like, fish is in the water, there's the water, there's the fish, there's outside the water, there's the air, and it's all in this, giant bowl. Yep. And so we can learn to use our brain, and maybe in some cases, some guided, safe medicines that, whether you've learned about ayahuasca from, the Amazon, or, from the shamans in South America, we can expand our awareness and tap into frequencies that are already here. And I've experimented with a lot of them in very, very safe environments. And it is just mind-boggling how they have the ability to change your life for the better, but also to point out, show you things that you would not normally see. And I'm going to emphasize, please, if you're going to experiment, read up on it, educate yourself, make sure you're in a safe place anytime that you are experimenting with any medicines or psychedelics.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's fascinating how you can see, they can scan the brain and see the connections that are being made that typically are not when someone is using plant medicine or something.
Yeah. What happens is there's something called the neuroplasticity switch that goes back on. And so if you think about the neuroplasticity switch, what is it? Well, when we're babies, we don't have any connections really. We have the autonomic nervous system. We know how to intrinsically suck to receive food. We eliminate automatically. We breathe automatically without thought. But then that switch is on from time we are born till about 12, 13 years old. And that means that our brain is creating these neural connections of sight, sound, feelings, sensations, etc., and creating these patterns at blistering speeds when we're newborns. That's why a newborn sleeps 20 some odd hours a day, is these connections are being created, which requires energy. But around 12, that switch goes off, and now we're in the reinforcement years. Mm-hmm. Right. And so now we've learned that, our brain is not hardwired at birth. And the discovery of the century, in my opinion, was that not only do we create new brain cells, neurogenesis, but we are creating new connections, and we can deliberately turn on that neuroplasticity switch. Yeah. And that's the essence of, why I created, Inner Size, is to help people deliberately turn it on. And so we are, we're on the cusp of some just amazing discoveries in the next 5-10 years, especially with AI.
Yeah. I think it's so freeing, epigenetics, and understanding it's not just in the genes that are these fixed things that you were told when you were a kid. That's why you're this way, just like grandpa.
You're just like grandpa. Yeah. Right. And the research on epigenetics, is that we have more control over, epigenetics than we thought we did. A lot of people thought that because you have the propensity, that it's going to, activate all the time. And the answer is not true. We can override it.
Right. I'm curious, when we first got on video here, I noticed you have Frankenstein and Einstein both behind you. Whoa. What's that about?
So right over there is Frankenstein's monster. Yeah. And up over there is obviously Einstein. And many years ago, when I was doing some brain research around the lobes, we have the parietal lobes, the frontal lobes, the occipital lobes. They're just different parts of our brain that are like different parts of an orchestra, right? You have the piano, you have the violin, you got the, the trombones and all that stuff. Those are different parts of an orchestra. Well, in our brain, we have these lobes, especially these frontal lobes, which is the newest part of the human brain to develop. So our brain developed in layers. And the left prefrontal cortex is the CEO, the executive functioning part of the brain. That's like the decision maker. That's the imagination, that we can activate and say, well, what do you want to achieve? Why do you want to achieve it? How are you going to achieve it? When are you going to achieve it by? So that's kind of like the Einstein part of the brain. But its, counterpart, the right prefrontal cortex, is the Frankenstein's monster part of the brain. And I liken it to, driving your car. You're driving your car down the highway and all of a sudden a light pops up, and have you ever taken a hammer and hit the light, on the dash? No, you don't.
Can't say that I have.
Right. And so why? Because it's a signal to give you information, to, in some cases, protect you. You've got a flat tire, you're low on gas, your windshield wiper fluid is low, it's a storm outside, and your tires are spinning too fast. And these sensors are always giving you information. So Einstein part of the brain, sets the goals, sets the vision, sets the grandeur, right? But Frankenstein's monster is always on thinking, well, what if you fail? And you're embarrassed, ashamed, you're ridiculed, you're judged. What if you lose money? What if you lose time? What if you're rejected? What if you're unloved? What if negative? That's Frankie's monster. So Frankie's monster is the counterbalance in our brain to keep us from real or imagined pain or discomfort. Real or imagined pain or discomfort, and to make sure that what we are about to do obviously won't kill us. So it's focusing on safety and security, and it's focusing on avoidance of real or imagined pain or discomfort. So let's say you want to leave your job and you want to start a business, and you get all excited, and Einstein, is there. Yeah, we could do this and we could do this, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to leave on this day. The other part of your brain will come online and go, hold on a second there. What if your business isn't a success? What if you can't pay the rent or the mortgage or the car payment or have enough money for food? Now, why does our brain do that? Well, we must understand the hierarchy of our brain. The number one priority of the human brain is survival. Number two priority is move away from any real or imagined pain or discomfort, whether it's emotional pain, mental pain, financial pain, physical pain, or discomfort. So biologically, we have this built-in system of protection. Now, that's the good news. The challenging news is as that part of our brain is thinking of the negative consequences, potential ones, it's releasing the neurochemicals of those negative consequences in the present moment. And usually it's cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine. And that is what the fight, flight, or freeze nervous system is all about, the sympathetic nervous system. Now, I know I'm getting too mechanical, but these are the checks and balances in a brain that's evolved over billions of years of evolution to do what it does before it looks for pleasure and gain. So these are all systems that happen, in billionths of a second. And so first we have to understand that there's nothing wrong with you if you're afraid. There's nothing wrong with you if you have negative thoughts or disempowering emotions. But you cannot let them control you. You have to understand how powerful self-talk is. You have to understand how powerful emotional regulation is. And you have to understand how powerful your habits are. Because by default, our brain reinforces the habits that we've developed. Yeah. So now we're getting into, well, can I have more control over, my thoughts? Can I have more control over my automatic negative thoughts? We call them ants, right? Automatic negative thoughts or automatic negative emotions or automatic disempowering behaviors. And the answer is yes, you can, but practice is what creates permanent new patterns that override the old patterns. And most people are looking for a quick fix today or this weekend, and they don't understand the laws of their brain. And so they read books, they go to seminars, they listen to this wonderful podcast, and go, wow, that's really, really good. And then boom, squirrel goes back to, what were you doing before? Let me go back to my habitual job, career, business, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, eating habits, etc. And that's why, when we want to change, there's a couple of things we really want to understand. Number one, our brain wants clarity around the vision, create a really compelling vision. Number two, it loves to have goals, which is the brain's targets. Number three, and this one is the killer app here for you. You have to come up with why you must achieve the goals that you want, not why you should or why you can or why you want to. Mm. Why? Because every step of the way, okay, you're going to meet resistance in the form of fear. You're going to meet resistance in the form of negative self-talk. You're going to meet resistance in the form of rationalizations. And the definition of rationalizations is you're going to tell yourself rational lies. Why now's not the time. Why you should be doing this instead of that. And this is just the way the brain works. And so we need the what, the why, the when, and we need the how. So there are different members of the orchestra, different circuits that you need to bring along in order to get your brain to operate in harmony and concert and in resonance. Mm-hmm. Because if it's not doing that, then by default, it's working in chaos or in dissonance. And so we want to create this harmony in our mind.
Amazing. Love that. Well, as we start to wind down here, I would like to switch gears a little bit to some story time.
Story time.
We love hearing stories of synchronicity, serendipity, positive paranormal stories, something inspiring and fun up your sleeve to share.
Sure. Many years ago, I was in the movie The Secret, and in The Secret, I shared a story. Mm-hmm. And going back seriously to 1980, I started writing my goals and plans and visions and all that, in writing every single year. And around 1992, 3 or 4 something, I read something that caused me to create a vision board. And what I read was, instead of just writing your goals down, on paper of the home you want to have, get a picture of the home that you would like to have, or the partner that you want, or the representations of your travels, your car, or whatever it is. So I started to create these vision boards, and I had these boards, one on my wall where I cut out pictures from Dream Homes magazine and put a picture of a house that I liked. I cut, a picture of a physique, that I wanted to get myself into. I cut a picture of a woman that I wanted to date and maybe end up marrying. So for health, wealth, relations, career, and business, I had these pictures that were representations of what I had written down in writing. Mm-hmm. And every day I would sit and I would look at the pictures. I would read my vision and my goals. I would read it, look at the pictures, read it, close my eyes, see myself, achieving all of these things. And so in 1995, I was living in Indianapolis, building my company Remax. And I put all of my vision boards in storage because we were moving to Vancouver. And we moved to Vancouver from Indianapolis, lived there for a year, then moved to LA for a bit of time, then came to San Diego in 1999 and bought a home, renovated it, moved into the home. And one morning, when United Van Lines had brought all of the boxes and they put them across the house, one morning my son came into my home office, which was just above the tennis court, and he sat on these boxes that the movers the day before put against the door. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Daddy, what's in the boxes?" Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, sweetheart, they're my vision boards." And he goes, "What's a vision board?" I said, "Well, when I have a dream of something that I want, I cut a picture of it and I put up on my vision board." I said, "Well, can I see what your vision board is?" So I pulled it. I cut the box open because it was still sealed, and it was been sealed for 5 years. Yeah. 1995, I left. This was 2000. So I pulled the first vision board. There was a nice car, Mercedes, that I wanted to buy sport. And they said, the car that Daddy drove in Indianapolis, that's that car. And it was some shoes, the alligator shoes I want. It was just stuff. Yeah. And then when I pulled up the second board, I looked at it in like disbelief and in like shock in a bit of a way. And smack there on the board was the house that I was standing in.
Wow.
not a house like it. I cut out a home from Dream Homes magazine.
Wow.
White house, tennis court, orange grove, swimming pool, 188 windows, ultra modern, like Miami Vice style home.
Wow.
And I was standing in the house.
Wow.
And my son looked at it. He goes, "Daddy, that's our house." And I started to cry.
Wow.
And he goes, "Why are you crying, Papa?" I said, "Sweetheart, I know now a little bit more about how we manifest." Mm-hmm. And he didn't know what the word. He was 5 years old. He didn't know what the what the word was. And I said, "Hold on, sweetheart." I put him to the side. I got on the telephone, and many people know Bob Proctor. Well, mm-hmm. Bob Proctor was the first person who taught me about this, law of attraction, resonance mm-hmm. stuff. Mm-hmm. He's the first person I called because we had been partners in a business venture. I said, "Bob, you're not going to believe this."
Yeah.
And I told him that, and he was like, "Oh my God."
Amazing.
So this house, by the way, was in a small town in, near a suburb of San Diego called Rancho Santa Fe. I'd never been here, didn't know where the house was, didn't know how much it was. And I was living in the house of the picture I had cut out of a magazine 5 years earlier. Wow. And all I would see is one day I'm going to buy a house like that. I never said I'm going to buy that house because I didn't even know where it was.
Right. Wow. Funny. That's a great one. That's really incredible. Actually, little tie-in synchronicity is my uncle recently, who was sort of my mentor growing up, recently bought a house, and I believe it's in Rancho Santa Fe as well.
Wow, that's funny. Yeah. So that was in 2000. And so for the last, 24 years, I have been studying how was that possible? Mm-hmm. And I've, flipped over every stone that I could. I've hired world-renowned experts in quantum physics and in quantum mechanics and neuroscience and neuropsychology to try and piece, mm-hmm. The answers to how this was possible. Yeah. And all my work now is based on what I've discovered, and that's what I teach.
Yeah. Well, I think, like I said earlier, tying it all together and giving people access to the tools in your new app, very, very cool way to do it, and sort of the culmination and make it readily available, to people in that way. And I was just having this conversation with my son last night about like how things are so readily accessible that once weren't. And this is just another example of it. And I know you've just launched it. We'll put a link in the show notes for you guys to check it out. It's I know since it's new, there's going to be a pricing increase that's coming and things like that. So if you guys use the link and go and get it now, you kind of get locked in and, can have access.
Yeah, we kept it very, very reasonable. It's like $9, $10 a month, or $79 for a year, or $199 for a lifetime. And there's, like I said, over 525 different inner sizes and different methodologies that are all proven by science. And there's also video trainings to stop procrastinating and stop self-sabotaging and getting rid of this and starting this. So I have world-renowned experts in there as well that are on my faculty. And we're just going to keep building it over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, and make it. It's going to be the number one mindset coaching and mental fitness training app in the world. So it's
already on your vision board, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Well, this has been fascinating, John. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your wisdom. And I do have one final question for you. It's my cliche closer. It is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to John Assaraf?
To learn, to grow, to love, to evolve, to experience it as fully as possible.
Well, you are certainly a great example of how to do that. So thank you for your continued contribution and example to all of us. And thank all of you out there for tuning in your beautiful brainwaves and incredible heart to another episode. Until next time, journey well.
Thank you, Brandon.